Some days you can feel it in your chest, the slow heaviness of working so hard and watching outcomes slip through your fingers like water. You plan, you push, you try to be positive, and still the needle barely moves. It is exhausting to keep rowing against a river that seems set in the opposite direction of your life. Doubt starts to whisper inside your body, not just your mind. Maybe this is just who I am. Maybe my timing is cursed. Maybe I am missing something everyone else was given. You are not cursed, and you are not defective. Your effort is honest. What if the river isn't conquered by harder strokes, but by learning its current and aligning with it, quietly and steadily, the way wisdom has always taught? There is an ancient way that does not shout, a way Solomon called wisdom, measured like a plumb line that keeps walls true, clean like a wellspring guarded at its source, incisive like a revealing test that exposes what is real, steady like counsel gathered at the city gates, patient like the ant that stores for a season it cannot yet see. This way does not demand that you become someone else. It invites you to bring your real life into agreement with deeper laws that have outlived empires. When effort meets alignment, pressure becomes flow. The same hours, the same hands, the same heart. Yet the results change because the order changes. Your nervous system knows this shift before your calendar does. When life feels chaotic, the threat circuits light up. Your breath shortens, your decisions narrow, and you fall into reactive loops that look like productivity but taste like panic. When you establish order before speed, your body receives a signal of safety. Attention settles. The prefrontal mind comes forward and discernment becomes possible. Guarding the heart clarifies motives, and the brain stops chasing every shiny promise. A simple revealing test cuts through the drama and frees energy that was trapped in second guessing. Wise proximity recalibrates your maps of reality, trimming blind spots you couldn't see from inside yourself. And when you sow for seasons rather than moments, the nervous system relaxes into cadence. Patience stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like strength. If you have been waiting for luck to open a door, consider that doors often open to the rhythm of alignment. Not perfection, alignment. Not frantic speed, ordered steps. Not more opinions, cleaner tests of truth. Not aimless loyalty, counsel that sharpens. Not instant harvest, faithful sowing. Let your breath deepen for a moment. Let your shoulders drop. You do not need to force your life into submission tonight. You are going to invite your life into order. Guard the place decisions begin. Choose clarity over noise. Sit with the wise and plant for the future that keeps calling your name. When your effort meets this alignment, things begin to work. Not all at once, not without resistance, but steadily, tangibly, and in ways that your whole body can finally trust. You know the ache that comes when another day ends with more loose ends than finished threads, when you leave the desk with that buzzing in your temples because you spent the day fixing preventable messes. You hustle hard, yet keep fixing preventable messes. It is not laziness that wears you down. It is the exhausting loop of rework. You try to outrun the chaos, and the chaos keeps pace, asking for another apology, another late night, another patch. Your chest tightens, your breath lives high and shallow, your mind splinters into small, urgent pieces. The body keeps score of every unfinished thing, and the soul wonders if effort will ever be enough. There is a turning that does not require you to become louder or faster. There is a turning that asks you to become truer. Order before speed, measure before movement, build, then run. The belief that more effort always means more outcome slips through our fingers as soon as we examine it with honest light. Effort without structure leaks power like a cracked cistern. Effort inside order gathers, amplifies, compounds. The hours are the same, the strength is the same, the heart is the same. Yet when order stands at the door, everything you carry begins to move in one direction instead of five. An old voice speaks here with the calm of a craftsman. A house is built by wisdom and established by understanding, foundation before acceleration. Wisdom is not a storm of opinions. It is a sequence that holds weight without wobbling. You can feel the truth of this in your body. When you start with sequence, your shoulders drop. When you honor foundation, your breath lengthens. When you let understanding set the order, anxiety releases its grip and clarity takes the reins. Imagine a plumb line hanging against a new wall, gravity marking what is true and what leans. Imagine just scales that settle when the measures are right. These are not flashy images, yet they have rescued more projects and more families than any last-minute sprint ever did. The plumb line and the just scales whisper a simple promise. Measure first, then lay the bricks. In the nervous system, this looks like lowering the inner noise so attention can return to what stabilizes the whole. In the mind, it looks like seeing the load-bearing beams of your week and placing them first, so the rest has something to rest on. Your brain loves order more than your schedule thinks it does. When the day begins with chaos, the body sounds an alarm and funnels energy into survival. Vision narrows, decisions grow impulsive, and you become reactive instead of creative. When the day begins with clear priorities, budgets that match reality, and routines that breathe, the alarm dims. Your prefrontal mind comes forward. Discernment turns back on. Systems multiply effort. Chaos taxes it. You can feel the difference in your pulse and in your patience. Picture your week as a build site with a quiet foreman who cares about your future more than your hurry. There are 3 bricks that always go in first. Not because the others are unimportant, but because these 3 carry the weight of everything else. There are time blocks that protect deep work the way scaffolding protects fresh concrete. There is a single place where every incoming task lands, so your mind does not need to clench to remember. When these simple pieces are in place, you do not depend on adrenaline to move. You move because the path is laid and the next step is obvious. If you have lived long in chaos, order can feel like a loss at first. It can feel like less spontaneity, or less freedom, or less room to breathe. What it actually gives is a different kind of breath. One that goes all the way down, one that returns your voice to your chest instead of leaving it trapped in your throat. Order is not punishment. Order is permission. Permission to finish what matters. Permission to protect your energy from 1,000 small leaks. Permission to choose peace over performance and still produce more than the frantic version of you ever could. There is a gentle question that begins the real work. Where am I rushing without measuring? Not as an accusation, as a compass. Where am I moving fast because discomfort is loud, when what I need is to pause and align? Where am I adding steps instead of removing friction? Where is my yes heavier than it should be because my no has no place to live? The moment you ask this with honesty, the body responds. Shoulders soften, jaw releases, eyes steady. The next wise step rises like a level line. Take the idea of an order audit and let it live in your day as a small ritual that respects your humanity. 20 minutes devoted to honest alignment can calm the inner storm more effectively than an hour of frantic work. Let 3 priorities come to the surface like stones in clear water. Place time blocks around them the way a gardener places borders to protect a tender shoot. Choose a single capture system for tasks so the mind can rest, whether that system is a page on your desk or a trusted tool you already use. The power is not in the brand or the app. The power is in the singleness that frees your attention from the strain of remembering. You will hear the fear that order will slow you down. You will hear the inner voice that says speed is survival. Notice how that voice always sounds tired. Notice how it never offers you a finish line, only another reason to sprint. Then notice something quieter beneath it. When order stands up, speed becomes a byproduct rather than a demand. Work begins to slide rather than grind. What took 3 passes takes 1. What created a mess creates momentum. Results start to feel easier, not because life became easy, but because leaks were sealed and weight was transferred to what can carry it. Consider the feeling of leaving your workspace at the end of the day with one clean decision made, with the next step written, where you will see it, with your resources assigned where they do the most good. Consider the relief that moves through your chest when you no longer have to hold the whole world in your head, because your world is held by simple structures that fit your real life. This feeling is not luxury, it is stewardship. It is the steadying presence of a life that honors sequence and wins back the energy that chaos kept stealing. Order before speed. Build, then run. Let the foundations cure. Let the measures settle. Let your days begin to reflect the quiet mathematics of wisdom, where the same effort, placed in a truer order, multiplies into outcomes you can finally trust. When you live this way, the mind stops bracing for impact, and the heart begins to believe that life can work, not by chance, by alignment. There is a certain fatigue that settles in the body when the same story keeps returning with a new costume, when a bright beginning sours into a familiar ache and you can almost predict the ending before it arrives. You keep circling back to the same mistakes, different faces, same pattern. The names change, the jobs change, the scenery changes, yet the undertow feels identical and your chest learns to brace before your mind has time to name why. It is not because you're broken beyond repair. It is because unexamined desires steer faster than logic can catch them, and the wheel that turns beneath the surface is stronger than the map you draw above it. We are taught to trust the spark of a moment as though warmth were always wisdom, and many of us learned a quiet motto that sounds persuasive when the heart is hungry. If it feels right, it must be right. Sometimes feeling aligns with reality, and the choice is good. Often feeling is simply a wave, and waves are not the ocean. When the nervous system craves relief, it will label almost anything as right if it promises to stop the ache. Desire speaks first, and the body follows its promise, and only afterward does the mind begin to construct explanations that sound sophisticated enough to quiet the conscience. Ancient counsel brings a steady hand to this tender place. Guard your heart, not because your heart is the enemy, but because it is the spring that feeds everything else. The currents of desire run ahead of words, shaping perception and memory before analysis arrives. And if the spring is muddied, every downstream choice will carry the taste of that silt. Emotional neuroscience names the same reality in a different language. The limbic system fires quickly, predicting and valuing with remarkable speed, and the prefrontal mind often enters late to justify what the body has already begun to pursue. When the spring is watched and tended, the mind receives a cleaner signal, and the future receives a kinder story. There is mercy in understanding how your inner world works. When stress is high and belonging feels threatened, the brain shifts towards short-term gains that lower pain in the moment, even if the long-term cost is heavy. This is why old patterns can feel magnetic in the body, even as the mind whispers, no. The urge is not a failure of willpower alone. It is a nervous system trying to keep you safe with outdated maps. When the maps are rewritten at the level of motive, behavior begins to change without the exhausting war of constant resistance. Inside this shift lives a sentence that restores dignity to your choices. Purifying motives improves judgment more than collecting data. Information is valuable, yet if desire is secretly hiring the experts and writing the report, the conclusion will always tilt toward what the heart already wanted. When your intention is cleaned at the source, the same facts arrange themselves differently. The timeline expands, the risk is understood with clearer eyes, the subtle fantasy falls away, and the possible becomes honest rather than idealized. You know the fruit by its effects. The moment motives are clarified, the body loosens its grip on drama and your decisions stop oscillating between impulse and regret. Fewer self-sabotaging choices, steadier peace. Peace here does not mean the absence of tension, it means the presence of integrity, the quiet strength of acting in alignment with what you say you value when no one is watching. Your sleep softens around the edges, your breath returns to depth. The future does not feel like a cliff, it feels like ground. Picture a well on the edge of a village, its stones worn smooth by generations of hands, its water clear because someone cared about the source more than the bucket. Well, water, clear sources, clean streams. If leaves and dust and small creatures fall in and no one removes them, the villagers will still be able to draw water, yet every cup will carry a flavor that does not belong. This is what happens when the spring of motive is neglected. The work still happens. The relationship still continues. The plan still moves. But the taste is off, and energy is spent straining impurities that should never have entered in the first place. There is a question that sits gently at the edge of the well and waits for you to arrive with honesty. What desire is quietly steering my choices? Speak it slowly and notice what rises, not to condemn it, but to understand it. Maybe you are driven by the hunger to prove you are not the disappointment someone once called you. Maybe you are pulled by the comfort of being needed, even when the cost to your soul is steep. Maybe you are chasing the high of being chosen, and that feeling has become the compass, even when the road is crooked. Naming the desire does not make it vanish. It does something more powerful. It gives you a chance to become its steward, rather than its passenger. There is a simple gate that steadies the hand before it reaches for the lever. You can call it a pre-decision heart check that asks a question as old as conscience and as modern as neuroscience. Is this about pride, fear, or stewardship? Pride wants to be seen and will pay too much to be applauded. Fear wants to be safe and will shrink a life to avoid pain. Stewardship wants to be faithful and will choose what serves the future, even if fewer people clap. When the answer is pride, you will feel a tightening in the jaw and a rehearsal of impressive lines. When the answer is fear, you will feel the body trying to make itself small and the timelines collapsing into now. When the answer is stewardship, a sturdy calm enters the room, and you find yourself willing to say yes where it matters and no where it protects the whole. The beauty of this guard is that it does not demand perfection. It invites clarity. You are allowed to want to be seen. You are allowed to long for safety. You are allowed to rejoice when ease arrives. You are also allowed to choose the motive that builds a life rather than just a moment. Over time, the nervous system learns to associate integrity with relief, and the old rush that once accompanied impulse begins to lose its shine. The brain literally rewires around repeated congruence, and the body's alarm grows quieter because you are not betraying yourself in small ways that accumulate into heaviness. Imagine walking away from a conversation where you could have performed, and instead you told the truth with kindness and feel how your shoulders settle on the drive home. Imagine pausing before a purchase that would signal status and choosing to strengthen a foundation that few can see, and notice how sleep greets you that night. Imagine a relationship choice shaped less by the fear of being alone and more by the desire to become whole, and watch how your future self thanks you without a word. This is character before clarity, and paradoxically, it produces clarity as its natural fruit. The water tastes right. The path reveals itself in daylight rather than in a storm of urgent feelings. Guard the wellspring with gentle strength. Let motive become clean. Let the heart you carry become a trusted source and not a restless river. When desire aligns with wisdom, decisions stop scattering your energy and begin to gather it. The pattern breaks because the spring is different, and the story that once repeated begins to change, not by accident, but because you chose to keep the water clear where it begins. There is a weather that gathers inside when choices pile up and voices pull in opposite directions, a pressure that sits behind the eyes and makes even simple paths feel complicated. The heart wants relief. The mind wants certainty. The body wants this ache to stop. Paralysis between pleasing people and making a clean decision. That sentence lands heavy because it names the knot without shaming the one who carries it. You know this place. You rehearse every angle, consult another opinion, stretch the timeline another week, and still the fog holds. It is not a failure of intelligence. It is the cost of trying to keep everyone happy while ignoring the one thing that reveals what is true. The belief that rescues us least often arrives disguised as wisdom. More time and opinions will finally make it obvious. It sounds cautious, It sounds reasonable. Yet time can multiply noise, and opinion can amplify fear, especially when the nervous system is already primed to avoid loss. The limbic alarms reframe delay as safety, and the mind becomes a courtroom where arguments search for a verdict that cannot offend. Meanwhile, energy leaks, trust erodes, the soul grows tired of carrying a decision that refuses to be born. Ancient counsel steps into this room with a calm that does not raise its voice, the two mothers and the sword. Wisdom reveals truth by surfacing what people will protect or sacrifice. The moment is not about violence, it is about unveiling. The sword becomes a mirror that shows love in motion, because the true mother would rather lose possession than lose the child. A revealing cut does not destroy. A revealing cut exposes what is living and what is pretending. In our time, this is less about blades and more about tests that separate signal from spectacle. When conflict rises, the loudest voice often wins the air, while the truest stake waits quietly for someone to notice. Don't ask who speaks louder. Ask what reveals the real stake. This shift liberates attention from the theater of urgency and turns it toward the principle that never lies. People protect what they truly love. People sacrifice for what they truly own. When a choice creates a small cost that cannot be faked, pretense thins and reality steps forward without a speech. Emotional neuroscience traces the same pattern in our inner life. Ambiguity stresses the body, and under stress, the brain craves closure more than accuracy. We look for consensus to reduce tension rather than for truth to guide action. The prefrontal mind functions best when the noise lowers and the path is defined by criteria rather than by comfort. A revealing test does precisely this. It lowers drama by raising clarity. It exchanges endless circular debate for a concrete movement that cannot be explained away by clever words. Imagine two proposals on a table and a simple step that would ask each party to invest something real. Money set aside with no refund. Time committed without applause. Access granted with accountability attached. Those who are committed lean in. Those who are performing lean back. The temperature in the room drops because the spectacle loses oxygen. Faster, fairer decisions with less residue. The aftertaste of regret that follows people-pleasing gives way to the clean flavor of alignment, even when the outcome does not please everyone. Discernment is not suspicion. It is love for reality. It is kindness to the future. It is the quiet willingness to see what is, even when what is requires a change of course or a difficult no. This is not harshness. This is stewardship of energy and trust. A revealing cut, a test that exposes true ownership and intent, is merciful to everyone at the table. It honors the person who truly cares by bringing their motive into daylight. It frees the person who is unsure by allowing them to step back without melodrama. It protects the work or the relationship from the erosion that comes from dragging half-truth across months. Within you, the same principle waits to be applied to inner conflict. Part of you wants the applause that comes with a flashy choice. Part of you wants the stability that comes with a faithful one. When you picture a small, irreversible step that aligns with each path, the body will tell you which future you trust. Notice where breath deepens. Notice where stomach loosens. Notice where shoulders settle. These are not superstitions. They are signals from a nervous system that has learned, through pain and through healing, what keeps you whole. There is a question that clears the air without performing a ritual or gathering a committee. What simple test would reveal who or what truly cares about the outcome? Speak it in a whisper and let the room answer. The person who offers real skin in the game without theatrics has spoken a language older than rhetoric. The plan that survives a small cost without crumbling was alive before the test arrived. The partner who chooses the good of the whole over the ego of being right has shown the heart that should be trusted with more. In practice, the form is simple: a deposit placed where there is risk, a pilot step that cannot be reversed without loss. A modest deadline accepted without bargaining, a limited access granted that requires consistent stewardship. The names change across contexts, yet the essence remains. Design a truth test for your next decision, a small, non-reversible commitment that shows real intent, not a trap, not a stunt, a mirror. Some will step toward it with quiet courage, some will step back with explanations that suddenly ring hollow, even to their own ears. What happens after is equally important. When the test reveals truth, the body relaxes, not because the path is now painless, but because the fog has lifted. Decision fatigue begins to dissolve, relationships unclench, work regains its pace. The soul stops asking for 50 more opinions and begins to move with a steadiness that looks like peace from the outside and feels like integrity from the inside. There is less residue because you did not force an answer with pressure. You allowed reality to speak in the only language that liars cannot mimic. The wisdom here is older than any system, and yet it partners beautifully with the best of psychology. Clarity reduces cortisol. Congruence restores cognitive bandwidth. Honest stakes reinforce trust. Over time, this becomes a way of moving that protects your life from the drag of drama. You still listen with empathy. You still weigh stories with care. You simply refuse to confuse noise with truth when the final choice must be made. The result is not a life without tension. It is a life without unnecessary turbulence. Discernment over drama, the sword test. Let this become a quiet law in your house. When love is real, it shows. When intent is true, it pays a price without flinching. When a path belongs to you, the small, non-theatrical yes is already on your tongue. And when the test exposes a different reality, that revelation is mercy. Even if it stings, the heart can heal from a clean no. It struggles to heal from months of almost. There is a moment when a room you once loved begins to feel small in your chest, a gentle pressure behind the ribs that signals you have grown while the space remained the same, and the air that used to energize now thins into something you have to work to breathe. You outgrow rooms that keep shrinking your vision or inflate it recklessly, and both forms of distortion leave the body tired because one starves hope and the other feeds fantasy. The ache is not arrogance. It is the nervous system recognizing that stories and standards are contagious, and that your future keeps inhaling what your circle exhales. A quiet belief often keeps people anchored where wisdom would invite movement. Loyalty means staying with familiar voices. It sounds noble, and there is real beauty in steadfast love, yet loyalty without discernment can become a soft chain that keeps you near what soothes you rather than near what strengthens you. Familiar voices can warm the heart while quietly lowering the ceiling, clapping for a version of you that no longer carries enough oxygen for the work ahead. The cost is subtle at first and then obvious, measured in postponed decisions, stretched timelines, and the dulling of convictions that once felt alive. Ancient counsel speaks with the authority of lived reality. Walk with the wise. Iron sharpens iron. Your circle edits your future. The company you keep becomes an invisible curriculum that trains your attention, tunes your language, and decides which risks feel reasonable. Emotional neuroscience names the same dynamic. Brains synchronize in relationship, mirror systems, echo posture and belief, and co-regulation either grounds the body or keeps it in a low hum of threat. Sit near cynicism and dreams will feel naive. Sit near wisdom and patience will feel powerful. Sit near integrity and shortcuts will taste bitter. Counsel is not comfort. Counsel is calibration. This sentence releases a kind of relief because it explains why conversations that felt kind sometimes left you unsteady, and why a sentence that challenged you respectfully sometimes left you deeply calm. Calibration trims exaggeration and fills blind spots, even when the trimming stings for a moment. The body knows the difference between being shamed and being sharpened. One makes you small and brittle, the other makes you steady and clear. Picture the city gates at dusk, elders weighing matters as travelers arrive, ideas tested where influence enters and leaves. City gates. Not every voice is an enemy, yet not every voice should pass without question, and the gate is not a wall against people, but a filter for wisdom. At that threshold, sentiment is heard and also measured, and affection is honored without being permitted to redesign the map. Rooms that honor this gate feel strangely peaceful, because opinions can be strong without becoming a storm that knocks the work from its feet. This is where the fruit appears in the day-to-day. Better strategies, fewer blind spots, stronger integrity. When a mentor who has no need to impress you asks the one question that reveals the hinge on which your decision turns, strategy tightens without becoming rigid. When a peer who shares your stakes describes a pattern you could not see from inside your perspective, blind spots shrink without shame. When a challenger you trust holds your values up to the light and refuses to let an easy excuse dim them, integrity holds even when comfort invites you to set it down. The body often knows who belongs at your gates long before the mind writes the list. There is a steadiness you feel after talking with someone who tells you the truth with kindness, a quiet within the chest that does not demand immediate action, yet somehow makes the next step obvious. There is also a subtle agitation that follows conversations where you were admired without being known, where your doubts were flattered into silence rather than examined into wisdom. The signals matter. They are not everything, yet they are not nothing, and they often reveal where co-regulation is strengthening you and where it is draining you. A single sentence can open the door to clarity without drama. Who in my circle makes me wiser, and who just makes me feel right? Let it sit in the room and watch what rises. The names that come with warmth and gravity tend to belong to those who cost you a little pride and return to you a great deal of peace. The names that come with a rush and a hollow aftertaste tend to belong to those who stroke your image and neglect your soul. The distinction is not about contempt, it is about stewardship of influence, the quiet architecture of a future that will ask more of you than applause. Many people keep a simple map of counsel that grows with them, 3 distinct chairs around the table of their decisions. One seat belongs to a mentor who has walked farther on the road you are taking and carries no envy toward your progress. One seat belongs to a peer whose honesty is seasoned with empathy and who shares the weather of your season. One seat belongs to a challenger whose loyalty is to your wholeness and not to your comfort, a voice that will ask for evidence when your feelings try to crown themselves as facts. Across a month, the calendar holds space for each voice, not as a ritual of performance, but as a rhythm of care that keeps your inner world aligned with truth. Over time, this proximity shapes prophecy, not in the mystical sense alone, but in the very practical way that repeated exposure becomes prediction. The mind begins to expect wisdom because wisdom keeps arriving. The heart begins to expect courage because courage keeps being modeled. The hands begin to expect steady work because steady people keep showing you how to carry weight without haste. Rooms change you, and you change rooms, and together those changes sketch the outline of a life that is becoming more faithful to what it claims to value. There is tenderness here for the voices you may need to hear less often. Some people are kind and tired at the same time, loving but limited, generous yet bound by their own fear. You can bless their place in your story without giving them the authority to edit your pages. You can remain loyal to people while being loyal to wisdom, and sometimes that means loving from a different distance so the story can grow without breaking. Proximity is prophecy. Choose your counsel. Let your circle reflect the future you are willing to carry, the weight you are ready to lift, the kind of peace that does not make you smaller to keep you quiet. When the wise walk with you, the path that once felt narrow becomes clear and possible, not because the terrain softened, but because your company taught your heart how to travel. Some weeks, the body feels like a field after a hailstorm, bruised by the work and strangely empty of fruit, and the heart starts to wonder if effort has lost its power. Inconsistent results play tricks on the nervous system, stirring a quiet despair that spreads through the chest and steals color from the days. You watch seeds you cared for vanish into the soil, and because nothing breaks ground quickly, you begin to question not only the seed, but yourself. Discouragement is heavy when time feels like an enemy, and hope shrinks when every delay whispers the same tired message that maybe this is not meant for you. There is a belief that sounds spiritual on the surface and sabotages you in practice. If it is meant to be, it will happen quickly. Quick is exciting. Quick floods the brain with promise and makes the body buzz like a celebration that arrives before the guests. Quick is not the same as true. Roots grow in silence before branches reach for light, and the deepest work refuses to be rushed because rushed work cannot carry weight. Seasons are not inconveniences. Seasons are the architecture of growth. When you stop demanding harvest in the week of planting, dignity returns to your effort, and your peace returns to your breath. Ancient counsel points to a teacher so small you could step over it without seeing the wisdom at your feet. Go to the ant. The ant does not argue with weather, does not sulk at the pace of time, does not pretend summer will last forever. It works in rhythm, stores against winter, and honors cycles that existed long before it arrived. The same counsel widens the frame and speaks of many waters, a vision of ships sent in more than one direction, so risk is not carried by a single venture. This is not anxiety, this is wisdom, refusing to bet the future on a single bright moment when a faithful pattern will do more good. Outcomes follow rhythms more than they follow adrenaline, and patience is a strategy rather than a mood. Emotional neuroscience translates this into the language of the body. When the mind adopts a longer horizon, stress lowers its voice, discipline stops feeling like punishment, and the prefrontal regions reclaim their place as steady guides. Daily work begins to stack rather than scatter, and the soul feels the relief that comes when actions align with time instead of fighting it. Picture granaries along a hillside, doors closed against sudden storms because someone thought ahead when the skies were blue. Picture ships leaving harbor on different tides, routes varied so that a single change in the wind cannot empty the future. Granaries and ships store wisely, send ventures where they can grow beyond your line of sight. The images are old, and they are tender with truth. They protect you from the drama of scarcity and from the illusion that one lucky break will rescue a life that refuses steady care. The first fruits of this shift are often invisible and then suddenly obvious. Compounding progress begins with small, steady actions that look unimpressive while they are happening and undeniable when they gather. Skills that felt stubborn begin to move because practice happened on schedule rather than on mood. Relationships that seemed flat begin to deepen because presence kept showing up through ordinary weeks. Assets that could not breathe begin to grow because resources were assigned with a view toward seasons and not toward flashes of applause. The same hours become heavier with meaning because consistency invites multiplication. There is a line worth writing where you will see it when the day grows loud. What am I planting this quarter that my future self will harvest? Let the question open a window in the crowded room and let light enter. When the answer is a skill, you will notice the quiet pride that comes from practice that does not need witnesses. When the answer is a relationship, you will notice how tenderness returns when hurry is not king. When the answer is an asset, you will notice how peace increases when spending matches seasons instead of feelings. Many people who live by this wisdom keep a simple 90-day sowing map that fits the life they actually have. They name a few seeds across skills and relationships and resources. No fanfare, no speeches, just clear intention placed where it can be kept. Each week they mark what was planted the way a farmer scratches a date into a wooden beam, not to impress anyone, but to remind the heart that time is working with them and not against them. Over weeks, the body begins to trust this rhythm, and the old rush that once chased instant proof loses its grip. Patience becomes strength here, not passivity. It is the settled posture of one who honors the weather and refuses to curse the soil for being honest. It is the quiet joy of leaving the field at dusk, knowing that seeds are doing their hidden work, and that tomorrow you will return to yours. Ant logic is not small thinking. Ant logic is the humility to move with time, and the courage to invest where applause cannot reach. Seed, season, harvest, in that order, again and again, until the field of your life begins to mirror the laws that have held since the first garden breathed, and your future walks toward you carrying the fruit your faithfulness grew. When you look back at the steps already placed, a pattern begins to glow beneath them, a quiet architecture that turns scattered effort into a single current. Order before speed steadies the ground under your feet, so the body stops bracing for impact and begins to breathe like a home that finally holds. Guarding the wellspring clears the source so the stream runs true and choices taste clean, because motive has been washed of grit. Discernment over drama gives you a way to cut through fog without cutting through people, a way to reveal what is living and what is only loud. Proximity that is chosen with care edits your horizon until wisdom becomes the air you breathe. Sowing for seasons reminds you that time is a partner when you honor its cadence, and that roots carry their own kind of momentum long before leaves appear. These five do not compete with one another. They interlock. Order sends a safety signal through the nervous system, and that signal makes space for honest motive work, because anxiety is no longer driving the wheel. A guarded heart then stops hiring information to defend an old hunger, which makes the revealing test fair rather than theatrical. Discernment that is clean of panic becomes swifter and kinder, and it invites you toward the voices who calibrate instead of comfort. Counsel that sharpens sends you back to your rhythms with clearer maps, which makes seasonal sowing feel purposeful rather than forced. The result is a loop that strengthens itself and does not rely on adrenaline to survive. You can feel the difference in your body when the loop is active. Mornings begin with fewer alarms in your chest, not because life has promised ease, but because sequence has replaced scramble. Midday decisions feel less like a courtroom and more like a clean table, where truth can be weighed without shouting. Evenings do not end with the frantic urge to fix everything at once, because the field is being tended in order, and the work belongs to an honest season that extends beyond the rise and fall of mood. The pace is still firm, the tone is still gentle. The outcome starts to match the effort because the effort has found its alignment. Each alignment carries a question that becomes a gate through which your energy must pass. Is this placed in order or in chaos? Is this desire clear, or is it busy hiding? What simple step would reveal what is real? Does this voice make me wiser or merely affirmed? Is this action faithful to the season or enslaved to impatience? When these questions live near your hands, your days stop hemorrhaging strength on detours that look important and give nothing back. The questions are not a test of worth. They are a refuge for focus. Over time, this integration begins to rewrite your sense of possibility. You stop waiting for a dramatic turning that will rescue you in one stroke. You start welcoming the quiet compounding that respects how humans change. Rooms feel different because you are different inside them. Choices land differently because the heart that is choosing has become steadier. Work moves differently because the frame that holds it no longer leaks. Hope shifts from fragile wish to practiced confidence that grows with each day of congruence. The same life, the same hands, the same number of hours. Yet the story bends toward fruit because the five alignments have become one way of being. Order steadies, guarding purifies, discernment clarifies, proximity calibrates, seasons compound. When these interlock, the scattered pieces begin to find each other, and the river that once resisted your oars begins to carry you in the direction you were meant to go. There is a way to let these truths breathe inside an ordinary week without pressure, a quiet rhythm that steadies the nervous system and keeps the mind clear when the day grows loud. It does not rush you, and it does not shame you. It gathers your energy in a single direction, so effort begins to compound. The tone is gentle, the cadence is humane, and the results arrive because alignment repeats. Some begin the week with a 20-minute order audit, not as a performance, but as a kindness that keeps the foundation true. 3 priorities rise to the surface like stones in clear water. Time blocks give them room to live, and a single capture system receives every stray task, so the mind no longer clenches to remember. When sequence is honored at the start, the body feels safer, and the hours cooperate rather than compete. Before choices that carry weight, a pre-decision heart check brings motive into daylight with a question that does not accuse. Is this about pride, fear, or stewardship? Pride strains for applause and leaves a tightness in the jaw. Fear chases relief and shrinks the horizon. Stewardship strengthens the future and settles the breath. When motive is clean, judgment improves even before new information arrives, and the day moves with less friction. Midway through the week, a simple truth test replaces debate with reality. A small step that cannot be reversed without cost reveals intent with more honesty than another round of words. The person or plan that leans in when skin is in the game has already told you the story you needed. The temperature drops, the fog thins, and decisions regain their shape because signal has replaced spectacle. Across the month, the circle you choose continues to edit your future with quiet fidelity. One steady conversation with a mentor who has walked farther and carries no envy. One candid exchange with a peer who shares your season and tells the truth with empathy. One sharpening moment with a challenger who is loyal to your wholeness more than to your comfort. This is the 3-tier counsel map living in time, and its presence keeps your trajectory honest without the drama of constant reinvention. The longer horizon holds you together through a 90-day sowing plan that respects seasons rather than moods. A few seeds are named across skills, relationships, and assets, and each week the ledger of planted seeds is marked with calm accuracy. Progress is often quiet here, then suddenly visible. Practice improves because it kept its appointment. Bonds deepen because presence accumulated. Resources grow because they were assigned with patience and not with impulse. A day shaped by this framework begins with order rather than alarm, moves through choices with clean motive, and meets conflict with a small, revealing step that frees trapped energy. It draws on counsel that calibrates instead of comfort that flatters, then closes with the simple satisfaction of having planted what the season could hold. Sleep arrives more willingly when integrity has done its work, and morning greets you without the weight of yesterday's scramble. None of this demands perfection. It asks for congruence, and congruence is merciful. When the rhythm slips, the next breath is still available, the next small step still counts, the next honest question still clears the water at the source. Over time, the body learns to expect steadiness, the mind learns to trust its own clarity, and the heart learns that outcomes follow alignment the way harvest follows planting. Quietly, reliably, in season. There is a quiet scene that returns at the end of a long journey, a room stilled by dusk, where tools are set down and breath grows deep again, and in that softened light, the story gathers itself and becomes honest. You remember how the walls stood straighter when the plumb line appeared, how measurement steadied the hands that used to hurry, how order stopped being a cage and became a home that could hold your work without shaking it loose. You remember the taste of clear water at the wellspring when the source was tended with care, how motives that once muddied the stream settled to the bottom, how the mind could finally read its own reflections without distortion. You remember the sword held above the noise, not to wound but to reveal, how a single honest test cut through the theater and left what was living still alive in your hands. You remember the city gates at evening with voices that steadied your horizon, how counsel made room for courage and trimmed the exaggerations that used to steal your sleep. You remember the ant and the granary and the harbor, small faithful movements that mocked the famine of hurry and replaced it with the wealth of seasons. If you listen closely, the body tells the same story in its own language, Shoulders that once lived near the ears now rest where they belong. The jaw that used to lock in the middle of the day now remembers how to unclench. The breath that used to stop and start now travels the full length of the spine, like a river that trusts its banks. This is not the absence of challenge. It is the presence of coherence. The limbic storms still pass through, yet they no longer redraw the map, because the prefrontal mind has been invited back to the table, and the heart that sits with it has been washed of the grit that made everything taste like urgency. You did not force a breakthrough into being with more noise. You apprenticed yourself to older laws that do not age, and you let them braid themselves through your hours until the hours began to change. Order before speed gave your days a skeleton that does not tire. Guarding the wellspring gave your choices a taste that does not sour. Discernment over drama gave your path a light that does not hum. Proximity chosen with care gave your future a vocabulary that does not flatter. Sowing for seasons gave your timeline a patience that does not quit. 5 truths, 1 current, 5 images, 1 river. Some changes arrive with trumpets that make everyone turn their heads at once. The changes that last move more like dawn, slow and undeniable, illuminating the edges first and then the center, asking for no applause as they reveal what was already there, waiting to be seen. The work you have heard here lives at that pace. It is the pace of healing that does not need a witness to be real, the pace of character that does not bargain with comfort, the pace of wisdom that values fruit over fireworks. In this light, the ordinary becomes holy again. Calendars become altars, small decisions become seeds, and every seed remembers the forest it belongs to. What began as survival has been transformed into stewardship, and stewardship changes how memory holds your story. The chapters that once felt like proof of failure become evidence of practice, and practice becomes a kind of prayer that keeps returning the heart to what it wants to love most. The old echoes still try to call you back into the rooms where your name was confusion and your worth was performance, yet their volume no longer determines your steps. You have learned the sound of your own integrity. It is quieter than applause and stronger than fear. There is a tenderness in this ending, because endings are often beginnings wearing kinder clothes. You will walk out of this chapter into days that are still human, which means some will be smooth and some will be wild, some will bring harvest and some will feel like winter, some will invite celebration and some will ask for endurance. Yet under each day, the same current runs, a way of being that does not depend on weather to keep its promise. Alignment becomes a shelter large enough for your joy and your grief, your progress and your pauses, the work you can measure and the work that happens in the dark without your permission. Let the images remain near your hands, the way a craftsman keeps trusted tools within reach, the plumb line that tells the truth without a speech, the wellspring that carries the taste of what you love most, the revealing cut that ends the need for performance. The city gates where your future learns how to speak, the ant that refuses to be ashamed of small, faithful steps. When you hold them together, you hold a way of life that respects your limits and honors your calling, that steadies your nervous system and opens your spirit, that refuses both cynicism and naivete and walks the middle path where wisdom waits. A last stillness gathers before the credits, the kind that lets gratitude find its voice. Gratitude for the part of you that kept rowing when the river felt cruel. Gratitude for the moments of truth that stung and then set you free. Gratitude for the rooms that made you wiser even when you arrived tired. Gratitude for time itself, which is not your enemy when you befriend its seasons and sow with open hands. In that stillness, hope rises again, not as a shout, but as a steady presence that chooses to remain. One question lingers in the air like a bell that keeps ringing after the hand has left the rope. Which alignment will you practice first this week, and who will notice the difference? Let the answer find you without force. Let it arrive the way dawn arrives, and when it does, may the river that once resisted your oars begin to carry you with a strength that feels like home.